Let's bring in Stephen Miller. He's former White House senior policy advisor and founder of America First Legal. Stephen, great to see you. Happy July 4th. Happy Independence Day. You know, Americans aren't just frustrated with inflation. What they're really, I think what frustrates them almost as much is the fact that they knew it was avoidable. They know instinctively that it was avoidable, particularly with regard to energy.
Well, it was all avoidable, all of it self-inflicted, all of it the result and the sole result of Joe Biden's policy choices. For starters, he began his presidency with the American Rescue Act, $2 trillion of wildly inflationary spending, in part designed to continue keeping people at home and not working. We know as well that Biden launched a war on American energy from the day he took office. Right. That war on American energy included, but is not limited to, shutting down one of the richest oil reserves on the face of the earth, which is the Alaska National Wildlife Refuge, brought online by President Trump, shut down by Joe Biden. That one reserve alone, Anwar, would produce daily 7 times what our daily imports were from Russia in a high import year. Right. 7 times as much. So all of this is inflicted by Biden's policy choices.
Well, and they've come out with this sort of lame excuse saying, well, it's necessary that we go through this difficult transition in order to create this fanciful green new world order. I mean, it's like they're saying, get used to it. You guys are lab rats. You Americans are lab rats in this great experiment that we have. And after it's all over, everybody will be better off. We don't want to be lab rats in some progressive's experiment.
Well, you heard Brian Deese of the President's National Economic Council.
Let me just hold on a second, because we actually have the soundbite you're referring to. Let me play that soundbite and get your reaction. Roll tape.
Well, what you heard from the president today was a clear articulation of the stakes. This is about the future of the liberal world order, and we have to stand firm.
So we have to do this for their new liberal order.
Right. Well, first of all, it's important to note that Brian Deese is formerly of BlackRock, which is the asset management firm that has been one of the driving forces behind the war on American energy. And so this is a continuation, in a sense, of his prior work. Let's be very clear. When he says the phrase liberal international order or liberal world order, what he's referring to is the Biden administration's agenda of open borders, offshoring, outsourcing, unregulated crime, late-term abortion, the whole Biden war on American energy. That's what they're talking about. That's how they see the world order in the 21st century, antithetical to everything Americans believe, antithetical to everything our country was founded upon. And I would also note that world order includes rigorous censorship of free speech, rigorous restrictions on Americans' abilities to express themselves peacefully, a true assault on the American tradition of patriotic dissent.
Exactly. Well, that's the point. I mean, that's going so completely in the opposite direction of what our founders had in mind, what we celebrate this weekend. In fact, I have an old clip from Ronald Reagan talking about our founders' vision and the reason why America is great. Let me roll that tape and get your perspective. Roll it.
Ours was the first revolution in the history of mankind that truly reversed the course of government, and with 3 little words: we the people. We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car, and we decide where it should go and by what route and how fast. Almost all the world's constitutions are documents in which governments tell the people what their privileges are. Our Constitution is a document in which we, the people, tell the government what it is allowed to do. We, the people, are free.
We tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. I mean, it runs so counter to what we've seen in the last year and a half, or in the individual states going back to essentially the start of the pandemic, when we were constantly being told what to do.
But this is an administration that believes in command and control.
Yes.
It believes suppressing citizens. It believes in abridging their rights, whether you're talking about restricting their ability to speak freely, their ability to practice religion freely, their ability to bear arms freely, their ability to be able to put gas in their car, their ability to put food on the table for their families. This is an administration where the BlackRock executives of the world will do quite well flying in jets to international conferences, but the working and middle classes who make this country run will be ground under the boot heel of big government.
You know, the elite in all of the countries that have big government, whether it's all the way to the communist extreme or some other extreme, the elite always do well, that 1% to 2% at the top. Whether you're talking Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, they do fine. They pass through it okay. It's the majority of the people who right now are the ones feeling it the most, and frankly, right now, do not have any support for Joe Biden. I mean, it's the lowest. I think it's the lowest approval rating we've ever seen.
Because the billionaires will be just fine with inflation. And you know what? Wall Street will find a way to make money off inflation. The asset managers will find a way to make money off inflation. But the working and middle class of this country, the people on fixed incomes, people with retirement accounts or small savings accounts, you are talking about losing money every single week. That $2,000 you have in your bank account will be worth less tomorrow and a week after and a week after that, even though you went hard to work 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, maybe 70, 80, 90 hours a week to earn that money, and its value is diminished every single day.
Yeah, but Stephen, we had some very good news this week, and that came from the Supreme Court and the decision on the EPA. And it wasn't just the EPA alone, although that was the target. But the idea was that you should not have an overwhelming government that does tell us what to do, even if Congress hasn't voted on it. So, I mean, this was a real Independence Day gift, I think, for the American people, saying the power belongs to the American people, not to some unelected, faceless bureaucrat at the EPA or wherever.
The true silver lining in America right now is that the Supreme Court, because of the appointees that President Trump installed, is continuing to deliver victories for ordered liberty in this country. And the one you mentioned is especially important. Unelected bureaucrats do not get to run our lives.
That's right.
The laws have to be passed by the people's representatives. And so the Supreme Court, in multiple actions, has returned power that it arrogated or that was arrogated by our agencies and given that power back to the people and their representatives. That is something to be very happy about this July 4th.
You know, I was talking to Larry Kudlow a couple of days ago about how the fact that at the very least, what we have seen is some of these progressive, radical policies play out and see how miserable they are in reality. So often they talk about pie-in-the-sky plans they have. Well, we've seen those pie-in-the-sky plans on the plate, and it looks horrible. So, I think for years to come, this is one of the silver linings to the dark cloud that we're in, that years hence we will be able to point to this period as a perfect example of why these policies don't work.
If conservatives do their job correctly, the Biden catastrophe will discredit leftism and wokeism and radical liberalism, whatever you want to call it, for generations to come. But here's the key. The history of America is that when big government grows, it never recedes. So it's going to be incumbent upon conservatives to see that this damage is indeed reversed before it's too late.
Well, I would push back a little bit, because I think Ronald Reagan did pull back the reins of government quite a bit, and I think your old boss Donald Trump did the same when he was eliminating all the regulations. Many more were eliminated than were created.
It's never been done before. And so it can be done, and President Trump proves that. But my point is that that's the aberration. The norm is that when big government grows, it stays big. And so we're going to have to work really hard to make sure that this incursion onto our liberties, whether it be in the space of political speech and free speech or the size of government or the destruction of the dollar, that the damage be reversed before it sets in forever.
What do you think is coming up in the midterms? Do you think that we're going to have some kind of such a pushback that, in fact, somebody in the Biden administration may be fired and some of the real radicals may be removed. What do you tell us your perspective of what might happen in House Biden as a result of the elections?
Well, Biden is never going to moderate. He doesn't have the presence of mind. He doesn't have the cognitive ability to overrule the staff that are driving the train underneath him. And so what really is going to happen, and the best that we can hope for, is for a very large, assertive, conservative majority in the House and Senate to use the machinery of government, and in particular the appropriations process, to shut down the worst policies and to mitigate the damage as best they can. There is zero chance that Biden, as he gets closer to the age of 90, is going to become more assertive over his Marxist staff. There's no hope of that, I'm afraid. The only hope is a very large conservative majority pushing back against this woke lunacy.
Well, and don't forget the Supreme Court. There is a Supreme Court that is pushing back against the power grab by those nationalists.
Yes, we need to make sure, to be very clear, they will pack the court if they have the ability. If this is a tough Senate cycle, if they get 2 more Senate seats, they will nuke the filibuster and they will pack the Supreme Court. So if you like the Supreme Court rulings that have been handed down recently, protecting your liberties, protecting your freedoms, they need to show up and vote in November.
Right. There's never been a clearer path to losing your liberties than losing the independence of the courts. That's always what dictatorships do first before they've done anything else. And we have to be very careful it doesn't happen here. Stephen Miller, have a wonderful Independence Day. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.